Hey guys, in this video I'm going to be detailing why my last cycle failed so badly so that hopefully you can avoid making the same mistakes that I did. So, bit of context and background. Last November I started a lean mass phase, and before that I was just eating at maintenance and I was on TRT, 120 milligrams per week of testosterone. So I decided to bump things up a little bit to 400 milligrams of test and also add in 200 milligrams of EQ. So 600 milligrams a week total. Nothing crazy, but a little bit more than what I typically use. Why did I pick EQ? Well, for a few reasons actually. First of all, it was a compound that I'd never tried before. So I just wanted direct experience with it so I could actually talk about it. And secondly, I didn't have access to Masteron due to the shortage which was going on, and still is going on to be fair, but I didn't have access to Masteron at the time, which is normally my go-to compound that I stack with testosterone. And thirdly, I needed some form of estrogen control, and I heard that EQ can actually do that. So I thought, you know what, let me try it and see how it goes. So I spent a lot of time actually researching the ratio of test to EQ that I was going to use, because there's a lot of variations of it out there, but the most common ratio, and the ratio that I did end up settling on, was 2-1, because I'm a moderate aromatizer and I start getting estrogen issues when my testosterone gets about 175 milligrams a week. So I'm thinking I'll start at 2-1 and then make adjustments. EQ does actually aromatize, but it primarily converts into esterone or E1 rather than estradiol or E2. E1 is actually a weaker form of estrogen, and it doesn't provide the same biological effects in men as E2 does. And what that means is, because the aromatase enzymes are used up converting Boldenone to E1, it leads to lower circulating levels of E2. So what was the result of this then? Well, first 5 weeks I actually felt pretty good. And that was because serum testosterone levels were rising, and it had all the classic signs and signals of that, including elevated mood, an increase in libido, and an increase in intramuscular fullness. So just what you would typically expect from a typical testosterone and anthate cycle as things are starting to kick in. But also because the EQ hadn't fully saturated yet. Due to its long 14-day half-life, it can take up to 70 days to reach its ceiling. Now, around the 6 weeks mark, it seemed things took a turn in the other direction. And what I mean by that is my mood started to flatten out a little bit, and I stopped waking up with morning wood. I thought, okay, maybe it's the stress of the new job that I'd just gotten around that time. And as I adjust, things will sort themselves out as I get into the swing of it. Fast forward a couple of weeks though, and at this point it was late December, so I'd just had a couple of weeks off for the holiday season, and libido and sexual function was still not returning as I expected they would due to the decrease in stress from the break. Around that time, I also noticed 2 other telltale signs that estrogen was becoming a problem. One was I started getting a little bit of joint pain in the gym, and it would be particularly noticeable for me doing tricep pushdowns. And because it wasn't exclusive to either the left side or the right side, I knew that it wasn't a typical injury and something else was going on. And the second thing I noticed was my physique had started to flatten out. And what I mean by that is a lot of the fullness that I experienced towards the very start of the cycle had just disappeared. And it seems like whatever I did, I just couldn't get a pump in the gym at all. Muscles felt really flat, and you'll see from the before and after video, which I'll show you later, there isn't actually that much difference, and that's because my physique just looks completely flat. And that's when I started to suspect estrogen was low. Did a blood test, lo and behold, estrogen came back at 18. And just for reference, the range here in the UK is between 40 and 145 p-mol per litre. So crushed into the dust. So after that, I decided to just pull the plug on the entire cycle. And the last 6 weeks or so has just been me waiting to get back to baseline. And the past couple of weeks, I've actually felt like things are normalizing again and moving in the right direction. Results wise though, this cycle was absolutely awful, which is what you would expect really, because you need estrogen not only to feel good and have basic functionality, but also for IGF-1 production in order to actually grow. Also, whenever I did try and overload and push it in the gym, I would just get joint pain. So overall cycle was just a complete waste of time. Easily the worst cycle I have ever done. I would imagine that the ideal ratio for me would probably be between 4-1 and 6-1 with testosterone, which means given my conservative doses, I would probably be running less than 100 milligrams of EQ a week. And at that point, is it even worth using other than just as an AI? You could argue probably not. I'm most likely not going to get the benefits on 100 milligrams that EQ is typically known for, like an appetite increase or improved endurance. So for me in my body, it seems like EQ appears to be a very, very potent AI in a 2-1 ratio. I probably could have used D-ball or just like a load of HCG to try and fix it a lot faster, but I didn't want to just throw more variables into the mix and just potentially go, swing the pendulum from low estrogen all the way up to high estrogen. So I decided, you know what, I'll just take everything out and just ride it out. For anyone that does want to run EQ, here's some advice. Ideally, you should have run a test-only cycle before, so you should have some idea of how much you aromatize. If you're a high aromatizer, I would start at 3-1. If you're a moderate aromatizer like me, I would start at a 4-1, maybe 5-1. And if you're a low aromatizer, I would say avoid the compound completely, or if you are going to run a really high dose of test, use like a 6 to an 8-1 with the testosterone. And at such a small dose, I can't imagine you would get any secondary benefits of the EQ that it's known for other than just estrogen control and maybe collagen synthesis, which it's also known for. So you can see where I'm going with this. I think the smart thing to do is to start really small with it and have an AI on hand just in case the amount that you are taking isn't controlling your estrogen enough. Then just see how you feel. Maybe 6 weeks in, do bloods, see where you're sitting at. And if you do feel a little bit off, make adjustments if it's needed. As far as it sits with me though, is it a compound that I'll ever use again? Probably not, if I'm going to be honest. Some guys seem to do well on it, but that's not me. And I've seen guys able to run a 1-1 test EQ ratio and be absolutely fine. So it just goes to show how much variation's actually out there and how everybody just responds differently. And at the end of the day, it's the same with all compounds. And unfortunately, a lot of this stuff is just trial and error because they don't actually run studies on these things anymore. My brother actually had a worse reaction to EQ than I did. It gave him this absolutely crippling anxiety. And I believe that is multifactorial. It crushed his estrogen, which can cause anxiety, but EQ is also known for increasing something called erythropoiesis or red blood cell production. All gear does that in general, but the main culprits of it are EQ and I think it's anadrol that does it as well. So why am I talking about red blood cell production and anxiety? EQ increases erythropoiesis, which can increase iron demand and deplete ferritin stores. And one of the side effects of depleted ferritin is restlessness. And that can actually amplify anxiety, especially in an environment of low E2. Another thing to consider as well is that gear increases the sympathetic nervous system. So you're more likely to be in a restless, almost fight or flight state as it is. And then you have these two factors of low estrogen and increased erythropoiesis just adding fuel to the fire. For me though, I didn't experience any anxiety. Maybe a muting of my overall emotions, which is kind of odd because I'm quite an anxious person as it is. And it just goes to show that there's even variations of how people experience low estrogen. and by what mechanism that low estrogens actually caused. Because I've crashed it before with an AI and another time with Primo, and each of those times felt different despite all three being low estrogen states. So there's probably factors like the different compounds affecting brain chemistry and neurotransmitters as well. So overall, cycle was a catastrophic failure. I spent the peak of the cycle in this like low estrogen no man's land where I couldn't push it as much as I wanted in the gym due to the joint pain. No pumps, flat mood, just a complete waste of time. For what it's worth, I will put a before and after up on the screen. This is in a morning fasted. So the before was in October, pre-cycle on 120 milligrams of TRT. And the after is in January, right before I decided to pull the plug on the cycle. Originally, the plan was to stay on until February, but I dropped back to TRT early to reset things. Scale weight went up 4 kilos. Half of that is probably water weight. And I would be lucky if I gained 2 kilos of actual tissue from this blast phase. Not what I was aiming for. I was looking to build at least double that, but hey, you know what? Lessons were learned and we move forward. Body fat probably stayed the same, which is the silver lining, I guess, which means this upcoming cut will be a little bit easier. I'm going to start probably late March, early April with that one. And I'm also thinking about doing a vlog style series of that cut, just showing what I do day to day, week to week to get shredded, you know, what I eat, the cardio I do, what I take, all of that. Nothing's going to be off the table. So if you're interested in that, let me know in the comments below, and I will still be making the informational content that I normally do alongside that as well. Anyway, bit of a cautionary tale, I guess, for anyone planning to run this stack. If it's your first cycle with EQ in the mix, start slow and slowly increase based on how much estrogen control you actually need. Don't just jump in with a 2-to-1 ratio like I did and, you know, end up in a car crash right in the cycle off completely. Thanks for watching, guys. Drop the video a like and subscribe for more of this content. We're really close to 1k subs now, and I just want to thank everyone for the support. It's been amazing. Enhancedplayer.com is the blog for sourcing, coaching and consultations. Bye for now.